Hello, Lisa. Good to see you again.
Hello.
How are you over there on the other side of the world?
I can feel seasonal change for sure.
Seasonal
Yeah.
change for sure,
Yeah.
huh?
Coming out of the summer, rolling towards the change in light. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Has it been a hot summer in your part of the world?
I mean, everything's relative, right? Like we're acclimated to hotter summers. I think it's not been as where I live, there's often wildfire threat, and I haven't seen it be just gargantuan and apocalyptic, but that could still happen. Um, so yeah, I mean, maybe that's been an improvement. We just have to look around the world to see other extremes. So it's never very relaxing, really.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And so we're gonna talk about the lunar moon today. And as we were talking earlier, when we relate to it in Hebrew, it's like yareach yerchi. It's literally the same word,
Mm.
and it's like a moony moon. And it's a very special concept. I find that for me personally, it's given me a lot of order in my mind and my perception of reality to understand this concept of lunar and and to kind of refine the understanding of the polarization that this reality is working through. And today we're going to shed some light on this moon and enable our viewers to better understand the concept of the lunar moon as a part of the 13 moon year in the 13 tone wave spell.
Mhm.
And for our audience that's watching us here for the first time, so I'm speaking with you because you've been practicing, studying, discovering, exploring this life in your life through the perspective of the dream spell calendar and the 13 moon calendar. And I've been inspired by listening to your podcast and meeting you now for the third time.
Yes.
And so I'm really looking forward to hear from your wisdom about this moon. I'm sure it'll also shed some light on my experience during this time, but also for our listeners and viewers to better understand what's going on in their lives in this time. So maybe to begin with, if you can kind of explain how this motion from the magnetic moon to the lunar moon works from your perspective. What is this energetic movement?
Well, to start, just overall, I want to emphasize that I think that it can be hard to juggle when you drop in a natural time or looking at this like modernized presentation of the Mayan calendars. You can be like maybe it's more agile to just go day by day following the Zolkin. But what I love about the 13 moon wave spell, which is sort of the same exact pattern as a 13-day wave spell, is that you can, as a scholar of the Zolkin, become really deeply invested and exposed to each tone of the 13 tones for 28 days. For the length of a moon is 28 days. So it's kind of like this deep dive into one tone at a time. And if you can spend a year paying attention to each moon, not, just not losing consciousness of it, then the 13-day wave spells, you just have a lot of agility. So, to that end, sort of to start with how I feel about the magnetic to lunar shift, no matter what length, and I'll remind people that it can also be a whole year that we spend in a tone. Um, we just went through the magnetic moon into the lunar moon, and I'm really glad that we're making these recordings because it's heightening my consciousness as well. But it's so obvious to me the difference. The magnetic moon is like kind of willed chaos. There's just this brand newness of karma that's delivered to us, kind of like, from a fairy kingdom or whatever metaphor you want, like dropped into our lap. Like, this is what your project is for the year. And it can definitely be connected and related to anything that came before. I mean, I believe that, but it can also just be startling or overwhelming, and it has a frenetic edge. That's how I experience it repeatedly. And then the lunar moon, which sounds like in the language, it's kind of like the moon of challenge. And that can be like, what more are you going to add? And it's really not like that at all. I've thought about this for years and years, that the magnetic moon has challenge within it. It's not like the lunar moon is giving us challenge. The challenge has already been there since the beginning. And the lunar moon is super helpful because it's helping us identify or understand what our challenge is. And so I have found it to be so much calmer, as if things are settling and ordering, and we can talk more about the specifics of how that might look like. But yeah, like there's just this tumult and newness. I call it like frenetic as a really good descriptor for the magnetic tone. And then the lunar tone is sort of like, okay, cool. Now, what is hard and what isn't hard? What is actually a resource for me? And what part of my challenge can I recognize this is good for me? This is for growth.
Yeah, I like that very much. It also brings ease really to the people, many people that are new to this wisdom. They hear the lunar tone of challenge and they think like, why would we want to observe our life through the lens of challenge? There's already enough challenge. Like we know there's challenge, and I totally agree with you that by kind of defining a time for the challenge to appear clearly, it gives us the possibility to observe the challenge like from a different side of the, like the other side of the pole,
Mhm.
of the polarity, and really understand, yeah, this is a challenge, but this challenge is actually something that I want to deal with. It hasn't just come to disrupt my life and just take me off course. It's actually helping me and here to help me to better understand what my course is and see what my goal is or what I want to achieve or what I want to break through or transcend in this upcoming time of my life, and kind of refines the challenge. And I find it very interesting when I meet lunar people that constantly, as you probably know, they're faced with challenge as a lifestyle. They're just facing challenge as everyday, like challenges that for the average person would be breakdowns, you know, big crisis. They just go through it like normal, and I really learned to appreciate these people so much, and being very open-hearted to them and being very open-hearted to their wisdom and their perspective from their own life experience, because they kind of really hold the the understanding of challenge for all of us as something we're invited to deal with, to go through, to embrace. And it's a really, I find it's a really change of perspective uh, from what we were raised up to see challenges
Yeah.
as something we should avoid or fear or resist or try to have no challenges as if that's some kind of a reality
Right.
somewhere.
Yeah. Meditate ourselves right out of that dimension of challenge. Well, I would say that I recognized at some point when I was really young, I didn't have any religion in my household, but I became really fixated on the Greco-Roman mythology. Like I was drawn to the idea of gods, but I didn't have anyone representing that. And so I remember like the Herculean challenges and these, I mean, tales are full of impossible feats that need to be accomplished, and then like spirit helpers make it happen. But I think of challenge kind of in that nomenclature of it is a demand or I mean it's an invitation to grow, but I think it's more of a demand. And so, you can look at challenges like this is a problem. But it can, I think, just be turned slightly to this is a challenge that I'm going to have to meet. And I'll be fortified by help from spirit. Like that part of the fairy tale is still true. And the calendar will walk us through stages where we feel supported enough to rise to meet the challenge or rise above and beyond it. And I don't know,
Yeah.
what is it in Hebrew? Is there a similar word to challenge that would kind of, it's not identifying the problem or the hassle. Like, do you have a translation that's similar?
Mm, I'm pretty sure the Hebrew language is a completely encoded language. It's actually it is really truly a magical language. Every word has a root, a three-letter root, and that's already been discovered through the Kabbalah to hold through the numerical value of each letter, like profound synchronicity to the divine and to the nature. It's like very far out consciousness. So I'm pretty sure within this word there exists this message, but personally I'm not familiar with it. It's a good invitation for me to research it because it would be really interesting to be able to back this perspective with that too. Um, but I for me, what the Dream Spell calendar and living life with this knowledge for 13 years has given me really the possibility to transcend my understanding of hardship and challenge and really kind of, at first the ego and the nervous system tries to deflect because that's the defense mechanism. But once the consciousness steps in, I find it's really become kind of like this. It's turned life into this kind of journey or quest. Like I always look at it through the perspective of the yellow warrior. It's like, okay, so there's a challenge here, which means there's some kind of a question mark on how do I go through this challenge, and how do I what's the path that, because obviously from experience of life, you don't need to be even very old or experienced in life to know that we go through challenges. We face a challenge, it seems maybe impossible, scary, whatever, and then we deal with it and life goes on. And it also gives a perspective on the bigger challenges, like here in Israel, what we're dealing with on a local level. And it's a very complex challenge to try to figure out. And there is no really logical way to try to understand it. Once you go into the details, you see it's like no human should be able or is able to really break this down to understand how you can really face this challenge. It really gives us the feeling like there's a greater power that's creating this process, and we're living inside of it for some reason. Some of us we've been we chose or have been chosen to live physically through this. Um, but it's clear that it's going to lead us somewhere more developed. And more developed must mean better for most of the people or most of the parts of nature that are involved in this. What we will need to go through this to face and deal with this challenge, that's the story of life. But if I take that on the more micro level, so it's true to everything we deal with in our lives as individuals. We face great challenges that we don't know how we will deal with and go through, and then we see ourselves step by step just living through it.
Mhm.
And
That-
so,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
think
go
that's
ahead,
an
please.
important, like, if it is really challenging at the beginning of a cycle, such as the beginning of our year for an individual, for you watching, like one way to bait yourself through it is to just know it's going to be resolved by the time this wave spell is over. And this wave spell is a long one because it's a year, so that might feel interminable, but each moon provides a shift. But the things that are arising in our lives karmically right now are part of the challenge or invitation to grow. And yeah, one way or another, we're going to see them dissolve as being mountains in front of us. Like we're going to climb the mountain and see what's on the other side. Now, on the other side is a valley and another mountain. So that's part of the commitment to going through wave spells is understanding that the waves keep rolling. And I kind of wanted to break the fourth wall and say, as an aside to anyone watching, like there is more light in Alone's way of presenting this than me. I'm much more of like a dark sorceress. I have a lot of skepticism that we're all moving towards a place where the breakthroughs are magical and consciousness is universally um, raised among humanity. So, like, I just laugh a little bit. I am enjoying being in the company of someone who's got more conditioned attention to optimism. So you can, and that's a perfect example. Like, hopefully, this is understandable to people, but the lunar moon is almost literally about teaching us to look at life through what we see on the face of the moon, which is sometimes it's very full of light and sometimes it's absent of light and it's disappeared. And then there's all the shades in between. So Jose Arguelles chose the word lunar to put our focus on shadow and light or darkness and light. And sometimes people call that good and bad, although that's not really how I would want to phrase it. But like being in the dark, meaning I'm lost, and being in the light, like, oh, I see my way. That's a really, um, I think that's the polarity of consciousness that we're in this moon.
Beautiful.
So I think that alone is like better at showing you the light, and I'm going to show you the shadow.
Well, also archetypically wise, I mean, as a masculine and the feminine, the masculine is more represented or tends to be represented by the energy of the sun, which is kind of more directly pumping life just to go in and keep going and keep creating no matter what. So one of
Yeah.
the things that I've been really putting the emphasis on as a teacher of this wisdom over the years is the fact that this wisdom has come to us in this time to help us evolve and on the most basic level even survive what we're going through right now. I used to say what we're gonna go through in the beginning. Now I say what we're going through, um, because from what I understand and my experience, what we need to develop in order to successfully survive and evolve and transcend these times is really through the development of a higher consciousness, of a higher perspective, of a higher connection, higher as in broader and more universal or even galactic or even cosmic consciousness to help us see that what we're experiencing in this very moment is just a tiny little speck of sand in a vast, vast, vast infinite ocean. And so it kind of gives us this perspective that we can take things more lightly and also play the game all the way, go all in, but remember to hold the higher perspective while we do it so we have this proportion, not to give all our energy to one battle because we understand it's just a movement within, it's just another wave. And though I've been constantly teaching that what we as humanity and especially as men are asked to learn in this time is to be more lunar, to
Mhm.
see the natural cycle of how life actually works, which means to accept that there is a darkness that we do not necessarily have to fight and
Mhm.
battle, and that there is a possibility for us through emotional development to be present in the darkness without needing to change it by just knowing that it will pass naturally, like the moon is illuminated half the month and it's dark and it's on the process of. So I think that naturally in this time, it's especially as a blue storm with development process going, sending you through the red moon. I think it's very it's 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 very appropriate that you play this role in this conversation in this time because I feel this is what the women are teaching us as men these days. It's like it's okay if you feel if you don't feel motivated all the time. It's okay if you don't feel like you want to fight the battle all the time. And it's okay if you don't fight the battle all the time. Just let go a bit. Just be.
Mhm.
Look for a way to be more at peace with the darkness, with the unknown, with losing control for a little while. It's not dangerous. You're not endangering someone else by doing that. You're not playing your role in the world if you do that.
Nice.
And so I wonder how you see this kind of movement that we're going through right now collectively. If you see it similarly or differently, how do you what's your take on it?
Well, I would say that it's just interesting. This is going to be my 26th year of following the calendars like every day without fail. And so you're 13 years in. So I recognize maybe in my arc that 13 years ago, I felt like I wasn't with humanity. I couldn't really get stuck in the everyday. I was developing spiritual consciousness that was kind of showing me a personal breakthrough into understanding the vastness of the spirit world. And it was, it was a perfect awakening. And then something about the political change in America over the last handful of years forced me to be like, okay, cool, you got cosmic for a long time. Now be a citizen again. Like, come back to Earth, play your part, participate. Don't be like, I don't even know. I am watching the moon phases, and I became someone who was more an intellectually confined by the human dilemma. And so a lot of how I use the calendar now is from within that space. Like, this is excruciating. We're in a passage where it feels like the walls are closing in, and there is a lot of frenetic energy coming through. Like, I think the internet is actually what changed things. Like, I can know about the whole world, and so the world became overwhelming. Anyway, using the lens of the calendars to kind of like sit here in the trenches of what it is to be a human being, is a bit different, right? And all I would say about where we are, like let's keep it for the calendar. We're following this year of 13 moons so that it's timeless for anyone who's tuning in. Like, this is meant to take anyone through any year, or even use these videos every day to get through 13 days once we've accumulated them. Like, identifying challenge to me is a responsible way to be alive. It means you're not in denial. I had problems. We used to have a new age world, right? And it kind of got disseminated again through the internet. But like, people were in that place where like, no, I can just picture positivity and that's all I'll need to have. And what I like about the lunar tone, the lunar moon, is it just is like, that's not real. That's not real. We can't have sunlight all the time. People that want to stand in the sunlight all the time are forcing others into the shadows. Like, I really see it that clearly. Like, oh, you love sunlight? Well, you're being a pig. Like, we
Mm,
have to share shadow and light, and
mm,
not be in denial. And
mm,
so the lunar moon, to me, like, if you live uncomfortable with denial, meaning I don't think you're an egotist, but I'm going to toke here and imbibe here because I want to keep it light. I don't want to go deep. Come on, guys. It's good. It's cool. Well, I think this moon is harder for you because it stops you in your tracks and it's like, no, hold up. We've got to wake up, be alert to the fact that there are challenges in front of us that we have to face, we have to be present with. And if you're more like me, who's like been in the shadows and kind of a fighter for the shadows, which is kind of a Jungian philosophy that I was raised with, which is just like, come on, let's dig deep. That's where the magic is, honestly. Then I think the lunar moon is a little bit of like, okay, I can exhale because everyone is sort of being, in the reckoning of doing that, coming out of denial. And then it's helpful. It's sort of more like, great, we're all on the same team where we're assessing, like, this is a harder part of life for me, and I might need support or I might need guidance. I might have to focus on it. And this part of my life isn't hard, and I can celebrate that. I can be grateful that this isn't actually hard. When we went through the magnetic moon, there were things that felt chaotic, and I didn't understand what direction they were taking. And we hit the lunar moon, and it was almost like instantaneous, where I could take like I could exhale. I was holding in, like, this is a lot. And
mm,
I could say, oh, you know what? That's probably going to work itself out over there. And this is still difficult. But again, the healthy part of me is like, it's not going to be difficult in 5 moons. And I'm willing to walk through the pacing of our wave spell calendar. That's a really big, generous piece I can give to myself, is patience. Like, this will unfurl as the waves always do.
that's beautiful. Yeah. So that's already, mm, I can say, like very profound wisdom from my perspective, because you've gained all this experience through your surfing the waves, as I say it in Hebrew, and surfing the years, and you've really realized that this cycle is constantly working and reappearing, and you've already positioned yourself in a place that you recognize it, and you're comfortable enough to really lean on it and live and lean your consciousness on it, rest your consciousness on it. And I think that's really profound. And I always wonder about people that are new to this wisdom. I have new students all the time, and when they begin, it looks like a lot of information and like this kind of, whoa, I don't know if I'll make it through the first stage of just understanding the basics. And I can really understand them, because I tell them, like every real wisdom, you need to walk the path. I can make it as accessible as I can, but it's about choosing to walk the path. And so I wonder, for people that are still new, or in the process of learning, or still, even of course, both of us are as well, but we've gained a bit of our experience to understand that we can work with this, that this is really existing for us. Um, how would you recommend someone that's listening to us to approach this moon and this and the lunar tone in general, to, let's say, if the goal is to go through it with as much flow and kind of least resistance, what would you what would you recommend for someone in this position?
Well, I mean, I wonder how bad it is for people. Like, this is the layering of the calendars we follow mean that the wave spells within a moon change. So, and they have different teachings. So sometimes there are wave spells that I think hands down are hard for humans. And I kind of like, here we go. We're going through some wave spells that the human ego doesn't like, or the modern human ego that we are, doesn't know how to doesn't have facility with. So that could be separate from the moon that we're in. I mean, I'm very reliant on the layers of the calendars. I do understand a few other Western astrology pieces, but I have chosen to kind of eliminate a lot of the other ways of perceiving life. I mean, there's astrology, there's spirituality, following different teachers and religious texts. Like, I'm kind of all in with the calendar. So when life is up and down, I pick principles from our calendars here, wave spell forms, the tribes we move through, to help me as anchors. It's just like, it's my faith and my commitment. It's my practice to kind of limit it. And so, one thing I want to say, not as a demand, but a suggestion, is that if you feel called to what we call natural time, meaning an alternative to artificial time, which is what the Gregorian calendar ended up being, to kind of make it a primary focus for a while, because then the different layers that are difficult in a way to understand have more room for your presence. The other thing is that, I mean, I know the phrase one day at a time translates around the world as a way of recovering from addiction, but one day at a time, we're all recovering from addiction, whether it's our own or around us. Like, we just have a world that, whatever addiction is, human egotism and, you know, overconsumption, I think it drives the cultures universally. So one day at a time means that you might be within this lunar moon, just remembering to look at your Zolkin calendar and focusing on the tribe of the day. Like, if you're a new beginner, you'll want to start with the tribes, because they have a magical quality of imagery, and it's stark, and it's for one waking day, and you will see synchronicities that remind you this really has some kind of ethereal paranormal presence. And that's why I stick with it, because it's like, what? Come on. That is a childlike, joyful place when you're like, you're kidding me. Come on. Here it is this day, and this is happening. Like, that's, I think, what keeps a lot of people fused to the path. So I think that's one way, to pace yourself through the lunar moon. And one thing that we've done is we've structured our recordings in the third week of every moon because I want to point out something really important that may not show up on the internet. You might have to have a wall calendar of the 13 moon year to see it, but the 28-day moon are basically our month, and there are 13 of them in the year, is still a 7-day week. And the first week rises in the east, like they're colored and oriented to the four directions. So we have the first week is red and it's in the east, the place of the rising sun. We initiate something is going to show up that's an initiation for the moon. The second week is in the north, which is the color white, and it's a place of purification. So something might start in your 28-day moon that feels a little fiery and intense, but then we spend a week kind of getting a blessing and clarifying from a spirit world that we don't even have to identify. We just feel spaciousness. And then, sort of unfortunately, boom, we go to the third week of the moon, which we're in right now, and it is in the west, the blue west, which, think of the setting sun and how the night sky, rises and takes us into darkness and it takes us into the dream time. And we can't see what's right in front of us. So it is like a journey inward. And all of that is titled Transformation, the week of transformation. And then, just so you know, the final week is in the south. It's yellow, and that's called ripening. But you can hear it. The word transformation implies to me, and I experience it as having an acceleration or an intensity. And so that's something to just hold yourself with love. If going through I call it the third week in the West, I used to kind of say it's like a PMS week. Like it's just a time when you're feeling perhaps overwhelmed, but you can hold on knowing some transformation is happening within this moon. And so I guess I don't know if I answered the question or if I'm kind of over sharing about it, but it's just like when it's difficult, find your anchors for why it might be and relieve yourself of the pressure of being responsible. Like it's not you who's messing up any part of your life if
Hmm.
it's challenging right now. It's just challenging because that's actually what life includes. And every metaphor brings us back to that. So the one thing I want to say, and then I'll let you say things, is one way to get through the lunar tone, whether it's a day or a moon or a year, is to remember that when we get to the next one, the electric tone, the electric moon, that's when we get help from above and beyond. The lunar moment holds us in traction with shadow and light. Uh, you see extremes, you feel polarized. It's also the perfect yin yang of balance, but it's like can feel so stark and brutal sometimes, but the electric moon is going to add divinity to this puzzle, to this problematic moment. So that's part of just like, hold on, it's coming. It's going to lighten, meaning be lifted if it feels heavy.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, like like around the full moon, where many of us feel it's really intense emotionally and spiritually, and just even tiring on the body, and then we know that it's the full moon. It will pass, and it'll get calm again, and then it'll get empty, and we will kind of even lose track for a moment, and then it'll begin again. And so I find so much potential in the lunar moon to understanding really how the world works. And again, I feel this is something that women, you have it within your system, within your most basic operating program. You develop from a young age with this understanding that this is how life is. This is how life works. But us men, we necessarily don't. And not just that, in most of our cultures, the Western culture for sure, most of the societies, we get conditioned to try to avoid anything that's not keeping us constantly in track, raising the pace, trying to be better, bigger, compete. And I find so much peace in this learning of the lunar tone and the lunar moon, because just like you said, it actually enables me to accept the fact that I'm supposed to feel empty sometimes, empty of energy, empty of ambition, empty of clarity, and that it's all right. And I can tell you as much, even though I've been learning and working on myself to kind of really download and live my life according to these natural cycles and rhythms, it's still hard work to catch myself in the true moment and realize that this is me living through my conditioning. And definitely, if I think most people and most men would listen to our conversation, they would not even understand exactly what I'm talking about, even because, especially here where I live in our society, people are men are still valued for being warriors,
Mm.
warriors with a gun, devoting themselves, sacrificing themselves for the greater cause, which used to be literally go out and protect your family, go out and protect your community. But now we're protecting a state, which is actually a government, which is actually a bunch of men with
Mm.
power, with interests, personal interests, making decisions based on what they've inherited from what's been before, but because of that, unable to really step out of this track and try to bring something new. So it's like what used to be these really higher values and very moral way of living has become a question mark. You know, Men are still doing it because they get called. Most people do it because that's the law and they obey the law. Others do it because they really feel that they're going to protect the people of the land. I know, though, that many refuse to go, and I know that many who are in there are deeply in doubt that what they're doing is actually making a positive change in their lives, in their people's lives. So I think it's a very powerful metaphor for understanding how important it is during these times that the feminine perspective gets more and more place in how we perceive reality and how we build our systems and how we aim our systems to develop into the future.
Mm.
And just like the lunar tone of challenge, I realize more and more that in order for us to go through the next phase, to the electric phase, to the place where we can really devote ourselves to being in service, we have to really um, uh, completely and fully experience the challenge to a point where we actually give up on trying to solve it. And then something new will happen.
Right.
And so it's like a very I find this learning of the lunar tone and the lunar moon to be in some way maybe the most profound in this time,
Mm.
especially with the 2020, the year that the coronavirus showed up in our reality was a lunar year, and it really kind of emphasized what polarity means in reality, what it can feel like to move from a place where things seem unified to a point of
Right.
immediate polarity. Like in one moment, suddenly polarity is existing, and then it opens this whole sphere of a new challenge that we have to learn how to deal with and go through and grow from. And so I wonder what does it look on from here? I mean, so the lunar tone gives us this polarization, this understanding that there is a challenge and this invitation to accept it, embrace it, go through it. And what happens there in this movement into the electric tone, into the electric moon? How does it develop in there?
It's like I hate to bring like a lot of recovery jargon in, and I'm hoping that people kind of, it's become universalized to some degree that I don't have to sell in anyone on this, but it's kind of like when you have a really big problem in life, such as addiction can present, it's really good to get out of yourself and see what someone else needs. Like the tangle of anguish or sense of failure or shame, like all the layers of personal failing that go into different downfalls for each of us in our humanity. Like in recovery, it's like shown like you need to help someone else. And that way you're focusing on them and not yourself, and it starts to lessen the burden of shame and perceived, self-immolating failures. And so I have really seen the parallel track in the 13 tone, you know, path, or the 13 moon year, where it's just like such a more important question. Like you could kind of say, like, what is my purpose is the first moon? What is my challenge or problem, hardship, difficulty in this moon that we're in now, the lunar moon? And then, like, hey, how can I be of service? How can I best be of service? What form will my service take? We kind of turn right, a hard right, as if that's what this path is. It's not one where we endlessly negotiate, like, this is my purpose, this is my challenge. We are sort of stopped in our tracks to add a whole dimension of holiness. Like, how can I best be of service? And it's not a decision that we're going to be make. What's fun about the 28-day moons is you can just kind of sit back like a passenger with that question in your life. Like, what is my challenge? Just take notes, You have a potentially a schedule set for you as a human being. Just go on your path through your life and you will see what your challenge is. And then next moon, you'll see how you can best be of service. Just as in our first moon, what my purpose is for the year is not, this is my purpose for the year, which is how we start Gregorian years. My intention for this year is, and there's too much ego in that, and it doesn't work out most of the time, but we receive a purpose in the magnetic moon by, again, just observing what is delivered to us. And right now, we're in this is challenging. And I like to think of us as Olympians, in that moment. Like, this is my challenge, and I've got this. I'm going to go for it. There's some incredible, super heroic people, and we are that in our own lives around this question. This is my challenge. It's going to be resolved. I got to face it, and I can. And then all of that, like me, shifts over to others. And divinity is what it's called the electric moon. And I know we'll get to this next moon, but it's called the electric moon because we're getting power source from what people call a higher power. To be of service to others is just being a channel for that electric surge from some higher power to help others. So again, part of the tension in the lunar moon of shadow and light is that we are waiting for that supreme being to come and give us some juice so that we can keep going on our path of challenge and purpose.
Love that. I love that. I think it's a really accurate context that you brought from the world of recovery, and it really aligns well with my light lit illuminated perspective of where humanity is really aiming to evolve into. And I love I love it that you brought up this perspective, because really we grow through hardship. This is what the lunar tone teaches us. We develop through dealing with the challenges we face. This is pretty much the programming of this world. We have reality, we have abundance of everything to sustain ourselves in these times more than ever. But spiritually, emotionally, we're faced with constant challenges, so we have fuel to keep going and improving this place, this world. And I think that's really the point eventually, that, even if you live on your own little hands-on farm with a tiny community or your own family, eventually what you'll find yourself doing on an everyday basis is improving the state of the land. So you have better food, healthier food, more prepared for the hard times, for the times that there's less, creating a good sustainable platform for children to grow, for animals to grow. And also, if you're living in the city on a big tower, eventually you're going to work every day, so you can have a better lifestyle, a better holiday, more money to save for your grandchildren. Each person with their kind of
Right.
material goals, but eventually it always comes down to someone else. Like, you can only go so far by just dealing with yourself and looking after yourself. And this is why I love the perspective of the electric tone, because which I'm really connected with, because it really takes us to that next level from and naturally it shows that it's naturally the next level from like self-indulgence. Eventually, naturally, we're sent off to service. So how can I take all this energy that I've accumulated, metaphorically from being with my head in my own ass for so long, and just give it out somewhere else to someone else that it might do you some good, so I can feel like there's a purpose to all this suffering that I've been through and all this challenge that I've gone through. And this is also where I see us as humanity right now. Personally, I'm seeing a lot of service all around. Here, it's always this paradox that in times of hardship, humanity steps up. And here in Israel, it's very clear and present. And I think this is what makes us love this culture and this land, even
Mhm.
though it's a very difficult place to exist within in many ways, most ways, because the hardship brings out the humanism in the human, and you can really see that people want to help each other unconditionally.
Mhm.
And I think that symbolically, this is a reflection of humanity in these times and what we're going deeper and deeper into. It's like, okay, so what if we take away the purpose of fighting for survival or accumulating to look after our communities and our families, and we give you a different purpose, a higher purpose, the ones that is speaking about universally making things better for everybody together? How would you get there if not through putting everybody through some kind of a collective challenge that synchronizes us on a mental, emotional level to understand that we're in this together?
Right.
And so I definitely relate to this metaphor you gave about the walls closing in on us, like it's getting more and more narrow, this kind of line that we can walk to keep our health, physical health, mental health. But at the same time, we're getting all these new tools to kind of start figuring it out how we can solve these challenges and take it to the next level, in which we don't have to only look out for our own survival through our own challenges, but start dealing with the challenges that we're facing collectively, locally. Um, so I've just by having this conversation with you, it's filled me with a lot of hope,
Mm.
and
I
hope
don't
for
feel
you.
that at all. And we don't have any war on our soil. But I was going to like throw in, I live in California, right? I am like some of the headlines in the Lunar Moon, if you just look at the cultural movement, are about the extreme polarity in the United States. Like we can never get off a two-party system. It's almost exactly divided in half. So if as righteous or right as one feels, there's always another 110 million people that have a completely different, disparate belief, and there's very little crossover. And what I have thought my whole life is like the luck that we haven't had war on our soil other than colonial genocide. That's been inflicted on the residents, but we haven't been attacked in such a way that we are united in a vulnerability such as you're experiencing in the Middle East. And so people can just continue to sort of sit as if we're one massive suburban, remove and just get into the polarity of ideologies and nitpick differences and live a lot of the time around resentment, which is one of the key components to addiction, right? Is that you're driven by grievance, and grievance politics in the US is kind of all we've got going. It's a war of resentment from one side to the other. So again, in the lunar moon, that gets really underscored. And so culturally, I'm always curious where we go from here, and not to like put a timestamp or politicize what our work is. But you were talking about the electric moon in a kind of glorious way. And I always like pointing out that Donald Trump is electric. He's a blue electric hand. And I have to always wrap my head around him. Basically, his Mayan astrology is, how can I best be of service, is the question he leads with. He's just here to serve, and he wants to heal, as a blue hand. He's trying to accomplish healing. So there are 110 million people that think that's exactly what he's doing, and 110 million people feeling like he's sort of the biggest assaulter on our sense of moral safety. So that's why we need more moons, we need more tones to see where we are taken. It would be
Yes.
hard to live in this lunar moment. So it's one of 13, but it's ridiculous to live without it. You know, that's the paradox of going through the 13 tones and the 20 tribes is the Maya had a way of brilliantly uh, representing the circle of life. And we need everything. And it's hard when we feel stuck in one, but we're never stuck. We just keep moving.
Yep. Exactly. I think that's the pinnacle understanding or teaching that this wisdom enables us to kind of download bit by bit into our reality and infuse our lives with is that everything is in movement all the time and it'll keep being in movement and humanity is just a tiny little bit speck of sand, maybe a little rock in the ocean. Maybe all of humanity is like a little rock in the ocean.
Well, to
And
that end, I just have to say, though, that means we're ephemeral. Humanity is something that we may not be able to preserve. You know, when we
yep,
transform humanity, we might transform ourselves into ether, and that would also be okay. Might be kind of
yeah,
painful, like when the Titanic went down, but then we're spirit, which I think is feels pretty good.
yeah. And then eventually it all comes down to a single swift moment that passes as well. And even if there's a bit more drama in that moment or a bit more peace and acceptance, we don't know. You know, from my meetings with the possibility of death, I found out that death is not what it's portrayed to be in the movies or in the
Oh,
media. Or
exactly.
it's much more friendly.
It might be
Uh,
even the golden ticket, you know? Like,
yeah, I,
what?
I I can believe that too from my experience. So I'm really curious to meet you again in the next moon and see together where evolution and our experience has taken us. And
Yes, I am too.
and I'm deeply, deeply thankful and grateful for this possibility to meet up with you in these times, thanks to modern technology and an open-heartedness and mind that we can share from
Okay.
from other sides of the planet in the same real time of our
I
experiences. And
know. Thank you, Internet.
yeah, big time,
See?
big
Yeah,
time.
the
Thank you.
polarity of the internet is represented in this recording. It's the wonder and splendor of it. So I
Exactly.
also celebrate that, and I celebrate you initiating it. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. And for our listeners and viewers, I just want to remind that Lisa has a generous podcast in which you share the perspective of the wave spells and the daily signs with people that want to learn and the more experienced and the less experienced. And also, I at the moment am still mostly teaching in Hebrew, but like this podcast, I'm also making my way out into the big world, and it's possible to meet with me one on one and have personal map readings in English and family map readings and relationship readings and professional map readings, every kind of topic that life has, you can look in through the mind perspective and receive a lot of clarity and insight and direction. So thank you very much. And
Yeah.
we will see each other again very soon because time is just like flying in this tidal wave that we're surfing. And
Yes.
I wish you lots of peace and quiet in your side of the world. Till next time.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you.